people had very successful businesses long before social media existed. And tons of people have very successful businesses now without it. And
Right.
so this idea that you have to have social media to have a successful business is provably false. And at the same time, leaving social media doesn't mean you get to quit doing all your marketing. If you leave social media, you just do other stuff and you get to figure out what that stuff is for you.
Welcome to the Sunlight Tax Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for self-employed people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, design nerd, tax pro, author of Taxes for Humans, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're a creative, wellness, or mission-driven entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello. So happy to be with you today. Amelia Hruby is a feminist writer and podcaster with a PhD in philosophy. Over the past decade, she's been a professor, a producer, and a radio DJ. Now she hosts the popular podcast Off the Grid, Leaving Social Media. And I will say she's the author of this amazing book, Your Attention is Sacred, Except on Social Media. And also like nice gradient vibes. I just wanted to point out that it has.
That's so fun. I love that.
I was like, wow, this is really lives in the same universe with the same feels as Taxes for Humans. So Amelia, welcome to the Sunlight Tax Podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah. I'm thrilled to be here. We had such a great conversation for Off the Grid earlier this year, and I've been really looking forward to reconnecting.
Me too. Me too. So will you just tell us your story? Like, who are you and what do you do? And then we'll talk about how you got to the place you are right now.
Yeah, gladly. So I, at this stage, am a feminist podcaster and author, as the bio says. But really, this was kind of a long and winding journey to get here. Right out of undergrad, I went into a PhD program in philosophy. So I was like, a straight A student, high achiever, trying to go down the academic path. And the deeper I got into graduate school, the more I realized that was not going to be for me. There's so much precarity, so much competition, so much, gatekeeping ivory tower happening in the academic world. And so as I was moving through my PhD program, I started picking up other skills. I was like, I need to be employable on the other side of this. What can I do? And that led me to a community radio station where I learned how to podcast. And that led me to freelance audio work. And, from there, I did a lot of gigs working with entrepreneurs along the way. And I was like, I want to be one of you. I want you to stop paying me to support you. I actually want to have my own business. I want to do my own thing. And yeah, that eventually led me to start a podcast studio and then my podcast Off the Grid. And then after 3 years of making that, I wrote this book that we're here to talk about. So those are like the very Cliff Notes version of the journey. And now I podcast full time and I have a membership and paid content. And I've built a business around helping people do business without relying on social media in all sorts of different exciting ways.
Yeah. Wow. That is so cool. I mean, I have so many questions that are really personal. And I think also my listeners are going to feel similarly because I think so many of us are feeling called to go off the algorithms. And if I didn't have a business, if I wasn't an entrepreneur, that would be an easy call. And yet the business feels like what keeps me tied to it. So I have questions. So my first question for you is, can you just set the stage for me? You are a former user of social media. So how did you personally experience it? Was there a wake-up call for you? What were you finding it did to you?
Yeah. So I have a pretty typical, what I call millennial journey with social media. I got on Facebook in high school. I got on Instagram in college. And like you, I really felt like I, at a certain point, needed Instagram to support my work. It went from being this sort of personal scrapbook to now I'm a content creator. I was a micro influencer. I made money on Instagram. I did brand work. I sold a book and got my first book deal there. So I was deeply invested in social media. And I spent so many hours and hours of my life trying to grow my platform. And it never really worked. That became like a big sticking point for me. There were two things. It felt bad and it just didn't work. I could not meritocracy my way to success. I maxed out at like 3,000 followers. I put so much effort in and I just
Mhm.
couldn't hit that 10K or 100K. Like my message was not spreading there. It was not, the algorithm was not picking it to amplify, et cetera. So I hit this point where it became very clear to me that the harder I worked at Instagram, the more anxiously attached I got to it, the more I was seeking its approval, the more I was checking it all the time, the
Mhm.
more stressed I felt, the more it impacted my offline life.
Mhm.
And at the start of 2021, I sat down and I wrote this lengthy list of what I called my Instagram rules for the year.
Oh.
And I was coming up with all of these boundaries that would sound very familiar. It was like, I will post every Monday morning for this weekly content series I do. Then I will respond to DMs for 30 minutes. I will log out, delete it off my phone. Then I will only check it from the browser for the next 2 days until I re-download it to do a series of stories on Thursdays. Like I had these very clear rules I was setting up to try to
Mhm.
manage it for myself, to be like, okay, how can I still create here, engage here, not lose this? But the longer I sat with that list of rules, it became really clear to me. I had this sort of lightning bolt moment of the last time I needed this many rules was in a toxic codependent relationship that I went to a lot of therapy to get out of. And it just became very clear that, like, I'm not going to do this with Instagram. Like, I'm not going to,
Mhm.
I know how this goes. I have lived this out with another person. I don't want to do it with an app. And
Wow.
I posted the rules and announced I was leaving a few months later.
Wow. Woof. Somehow you relating it to a toxic relationship, which I have all the boundaries around. Like I fully get why that is so critical. And yet somehow this algorithm feel like it's got its hooks in my body and I've kind of allowed it to stay there in a way that I think with a bad partner I never would. So
Mhm.
that really drives it home to me. Hmm. So I read your book and it is for everybody listening. Your Attention is Sacred. It is a fantastic book. One of the things that like kept nagging me a little and I was excited to ask you about is this thing about being a business owner and like needing to get your, you wanting a billboard, wanting a place to say what you have that you're offering to reach people and how scary it feels to untether to what we've been promised was that place. So tell me a little bit about how you manage the business owner part of that. Like, how do you tell people what's going on? How do people know what you offer? How do you make sales?
Yeah, I am happy to answer this. And I have so many answers because this
Yeah.
is really, the topic of my podcast is all about creative business. And the book is a little more general, just our relationship to social media as a culture. So,
Mhm.
when I left social media, this was one of the things I was afraid of and that people said to me. They said,
Yeah.
your business will not work without social media. You can't, how are you going to talk to people? How are they
Mhm.
going to find you? I had a lot of fear around like, am I going to be invisible? Is everybody going to forget me? And is no one
Mhm.
new ever going to find me? And I will be upfront that when I left social media, I stopped the sort of business activities I was doing in that realm, which was
Mhm.
teaching small courses, selling this book that I had sold to a publisher, all things that never made me much more than $10,000 a year. Like it was not a thriving business. It was just sort of what I was doing on social media. I stopped all of that and I started a totally different business. And I started
Hmm.
a podcast studio because it has a different business model. So, my first answer to this question is that part of the myth, the lie that social media tells us is that it will work so well and it will bring traffic and visibility to every single type of business.
Mhm.
And I think that's just completely false. I think there are certain businesses that benefit from social media so much more than others, especially at this point. I think
Mhm.
businesses that are very highly visual and centered in e-commerce can still do quite well on social media. But I think
Mhm.
that the service providers and the knowledge workers among us who were trained up in giving away like the free info, doing the stories, having the mini workshops that are just like totally available there, we have just been churned and burned by the platform. So at this stage, I think that it's a complete I want to call it a lie. Like I want to say, I think it's a lie that every business needs social media,
Yeah.
especially if you are a service provider, if you are a business that only needs a few dozen clients a year, if you're a consultant, if you're a freelancer, if you do high touch work, you don't need a huge traffic engine for your business. You need really deep relationships. You need a network. You need to be talking to actual people, not broadcasting your message to whoever might follow you from an algorithm you can't understand. So
Mhm.
when I work with people on can I have a business without social media, the first question I ask is, okay, what's your business model? What are you selling? How are you selling it? How many people do you need to buy from you each year to
Mhm.
make your business work? And if the answer to those questions is like, I need less than a few hundred people a year, I don't think your business has to have social media to work. If you are a content creator, if you are selling courses, if you need a lot of traffic in a high volume business, social media
Mhm.
still can be an effective piece of that puzzle. But for me, the reason I changed business models is because I moved to a production studio that was run all by referrals and relationships as I
Mhm.
slowly built an audience off of social media. So I grew my email list, I grew my podcast audience, and now I am a full-time content creator without social media again because I've built audience elsewhere. So does that
Yeah.
get to answering your question? What follow-ups do you have from those
Yeah.
ideas?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I just wanna keep asking you questions. So you're finding that building an email list and having a podcast feel like ways to connect with people that are non-algorithmic and that bring people in? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that those are my primary channels, are email and podcast.
Uh-huh.
But through both of those, I am always focused on building an actual relationship. So I try to make any channel I have be as conversational and like dialogic as possible. I think one of actually the
Yeah.
challenges of social media is we're taught that it's safer to like broadcast to a ton of people and then
Yeah.
blame the algorithm if our stuff doesn't do well instead of like
Yeah.
actually doing one-to-one outreach, actually asking people what they think, actually sitting with that feedback, which can be much more vulnerable for a lot of us. So,
For
yes,
sure.
email and podcast are my methods, but are my channels, but I am highly attuned to relationship building on those because I think the relationships yield the word of mouth, which yields the referrals, which is really what gets the flywheel moving. Like
Yeah.
having a great podcast matters, but the fact that people in rooms I am not in are telling people to listen to my podcast, that matters just as much as like my
Yeah.
podcast itself.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm so attracted to what you're saying about relationship building. Like, I crave that in my own business. That's what makes me light up. That's what makes me feel like I'm really serving people and like bringing the highest level of my ability out into the world. And yet, it is the thing that is impossible when you grow to a point of being I'm using major air quotes here, like a micro influencer, like that kind of a thing where you have one to many, many, many people where you couldn't possibly respond to everybody if they responded to you. And you almost fear feedback because if you get too much of it, it will inundate you. That
Yeah.
more human scale relationship building appeals to me. And to me, I feel like I've had a personal craving for it. So I guess what I want to ask you here is like maybe even just to reflect on that, but also like how have you found that you've changed doing outreach in an email podcast format? And how are you seeking those relationships? Are you asking questions? Are you like what are you doing to build that?
Yeah, I love this question because scale does matter, right? If you have, a few hundred people on your email list, you can receive a ton of replies and reply to them. Like you can get back to people, you can talk to them. If you have
Mhm.
tens of thousands, you cannot process every message that comes into your inbox with a
Yeah.
personal reply. And, even now I get way more requests for coffee chats and calls and things than I could ever say yes to. I am constantly
Mhm.
having to come up with new ways to say, thank you for listening to my podcast. I'm so glad that my work resonates with you. And also, I cannot offer you one on one time with me. I'm so sorry. Like, I say that over and over again. Or,
Mhm.
build a auto responder that says that to people so you don't have to. Like, there are systems and ways that we can do this. I think for me, it's been really interesting to reflect on this path because when I was on social media, I was so like driving toward a one-to-many business. And then when
Mhm.
I left, I was like, okay, I'm going to rebuild in a one to few model again. When I left social media and I needed to start a business, I wasn't starting a hobby business. I needed a business that made me a full-time income within 6 months. Like I had very clear. And so that's why I went the
By
service
the way,
provider
can we
route.
pause on that? Like so many people that I work with like that, that is such a need. And it's so nice and refreshing to hear you actually articulate that. Like when people give these timelines and things when you're like, but I have rent. I have
Yes.
children. You're like,
Yeah.
there's no luxury here.
Yes. And that's
So thank
also,
you.
you're welcome. I try to be so upfront about timelines, about how much money I'm making or needing, because I agree. When I talk about the business I had when I was on Instagram, I wouldn't even call it a business. It was a couple things I sold. I was just
Mhm.
learning. It was beautiful to have done that work, but that was not a business that was a structure that could support me. And I had to build that. And it's also
Mhm.
why, like, I would have loved to keep doing the work I was doing when I was on Instagram, but I knew it wasn't going to make enough money. I didn't make enough money on social media. It certainly wasn't going to if I left. So I have a very pragmatic approach. I started a service
Yeah.
provider business because I was like, I can charge more per hour with a small audience for this, right? For podcast production, I can make a living off of this. And I don't need to suddenly get an audience of thousands of people to do that. And so I made that strategic choice as, again, now I've built back to the one-to-many business. So that's what I'm thinking of as I answer your question. It's like I went from having an audience where I couldn't respond to everyone to totally shutting that down and then having an email inbox that was so quiet sometimes. I was like, do people know I'm here? To now it's
Wow.
like much busier and more active. And I think that part of this is actually really getting good at, I want to say this carefully, but I think a lot about parasocial relationships. And I think
Mm.
a lot about what are the ways that I can make people feel close to me through my podcast without me spending one-on-one time with all of them. So
Mhm.
sometimes I do kind of corny things. Like I have a theme song for my show. I have a slogan I say when I sign off that everyone like wink, wink, nod, nods laughs at, but like it works. People know it. They sing the theme song back to me. They know the sign off that's coming, which I always say, like, until next time, you can find me off the grid. I even have like the intonation, like I really build in these signatures that allow people to feel a sense of belonging just by listening to me talk.
Wow.
And then when they show up in my inbox, no, I can't give them one-on-one time, but I do try to send a couple lines to people. I try to like still have space. And they may not get those couple lines for 2 weeks because I try to batch some time. Like, all right, here's the time I'm going to go reply to everything. So
Yeah.
I've built in the systems that make it manageable, but I just always try to stay centered in like, these are real people. I look at my download metrics, but every one of those is a real person who's taken the time to press play. And how do I honor that? And some of that means that I don't want to get endlessly big. There is a
Yeah.
right size for what I want to do. There is a right size where I can still feel in relationship. And it's
Mhm.
probably about 2 to 3 times bigger than where I am right now, but it's not 10x and it's certainly not 100x.
Yeah.
And I don't actually desire to grow bigger than the size of business where I can still be the person I want to be inside of it.
Gosh. All of that sounds so refreshing. It's so delightful to hear.
It's definitely not the like, 8-figure business mastermind that's being taught out there. I'm over here like, yeah, this is what's working for me. And yes, I want to grow, but not endlessly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that felt like yoga for my business soul. Wow. I want to talk a little bit about some themes that you brought up in the book. And by the way, in case anybody's feeling intimidated about this book, it's a short and sweet little thing, delightful. You can read it in an afternoon.
Mhm.
Mm, But you do kind of break down like an intellectual frame or a conceptual frame around how we think about social media and its role in our life. And that actually what you do in the book is you change the frame. I could not appreciate that more as a reader of George Lakoff, if anybody knows what that means. I love that you do that. And one of these things is moving from like a scarcity economics and scarcity model, like attention being something that is limited and a scarce resource to be allocated according to certain metrics or priorities, to an ecology model where it's more expansive and generative. Can you talk to me a little bit about that shift towards the frame of ecology, your attention as ecology?
Yeah, I'd love to. This was really, I made my podcast about social media for over 3 years before I finally figured out, like, what am I saying? And that's when I wrote the book. When I had something, I was like, oh, this is what I'm saying. So, and of
Yeah.
course, I have a background in philosophy. I wrote a dissertation. I've spent a lot of time. So when I started to write the book, I thought it was going to be more of a handbook. And then it was like a philosophical manifesto. And I was like, oh, fascinating. This is what came out.
Yeah.
So, where I kind of started is I've always had this bone to pick, I suppose, with the concept of the attention economy.
Uh-huh.
And I think that the attention economy, as we understand it, describes the sort of phenomenon where our attention as users or consumers is like bought and sold and traded on a market. It's an economic resource. And I think that's very real. And it's happening on social media. I completely agree with like what the economics of social media is an attention economy.
Mhm.
But I was noticing a lot of people take this sense of attention economy and then use it as proof that human attention is by definition scarce. Because one of the definitions of economics is that it's how we distribute scarce resources.
Mhm.
It's not the only definition, but it's the most common in the US or in a capitalist culture, I would say.
Yeah.
And so there was this sort of like slipperiness happening where it's like, oh, well, if there's an attention economy on social media, that means everybody's attention is super scarce. And then, of course, we feel like our attention is fractured. We feel like we're being pulled a million directions because of the pressures of capitalism and social media.
Mhm.
But I think there's something so much deeper within us. Like, I think attention is just how we tend to the world. And I think that's infinite. That's limitless, right? Maybe it's
Mhm.
limited by our lifetime, like how, like the end of our life, perhaps. Maybe not if you have a more spiritual or quantum framework for that. But I just
Mhm.
think that our attention is actually a limitless resource that is being extracted and exploited by an attention economy, but that doesn't define it. And so once I started thinking of it that way, I was like, okay, so how, if I don't want to approach attention as economic and scarce, how do I want to approach it? And I wanted to think of it ecologically as just a one facet and texture of my life.
Mhm.
And so what I do, in the first chapter of the book, I kind of walk through that breakdown or that deconstruction of the attention economy. But in the third chapter, I offer these principles for kind of, remediating our attention, taking it from economic to ecological, and really centering in our own agency and how we can garden our attention, as I like to call it. So then I kind of use these permaculture principles to understand our attention. So I'll pause there because I don't know if we want to go into all of that, but I'm curious, like, what lands for you about do you feel like your attention is scarce? Do you want to relate to it ecologically? What was resonating there?
Yeah. I love this. I mean, you use the word quantum sometimes in the book, and I don't know. It's a little bit. I'm like, do I really think that's true? I'm really wrestling with it internally, but there are like a place that I will give an analogy is like with fitness. I am semi obsessed. I mean, I just really, really care a lot about staying fit and becoming, weightlifting, doing cardio. Because what I find is that energy is not like, just like you're saying that attention is not necessarily a finite resource. I find that energy is that way. And that like energy is what makes my day great. A low energy day is not as awesome as a high energy day. And I have more high energy days, the more I cultivate my energy through being fit. Like I actually create more energy for myself by maintaining this system.
Yeah.
And so I think of it like that's a way where I kind of stretched into this idea and I was like, okay, it's true. Like it is true what you're saying. I agree with you is what I'm saying in a long-winded way.
No, I think that's really helpful though. And I think it's nice to think about for anyone listening, like, what are the things in your life that feel scarce or like you
Mhm.
never have enough of them? I mean, part of the reason I started doing quantum stuff is because I was thinking about time. So many of us feel like we
Yeah.
never have enough time, right? But
Mhm.
also, time doesn't always feel or move the same way, right?
It's
10
true.
minutes spent doing something you love feels so different than 10 minutes spent doing, normally here I say taxes, but on your podcast,
You know
maybe we
what? I
love
don't
doing
think that's
taxes.
different. I think you can say over here.
Right. So it's like, time feels so different as well, just the way I think our attention feels different. And time can feel scarce because of external circumstances or pressures, but that doesn't mean time itself is scarce. So a
Yeah.
lot of this frame shift I'm trying to do is just making us notice that, you know, what we take to be true of ourselves and our experience may actually just be an effect of all the pressures and systems that we live in.
I
And
agree.
so, like you said, with energy, and what I love about your example with fitness too is actually, you know, being fit, moving your body, lifting weights is an expenditure of energy, but
Oh,
it
yeah.
is regenerative and it brings back even more yield. You
It
actually
brings
get
it.
more than you put in, right? It's a
Yeah.
great investment.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about attention too. It's like actually when
Mm,
I do the work of honing my attention intentionally, I have
mhm.
more of it than I ever realized. I can notice so many things. I can be with them in different ways. I can tend to more than I think I have the capacity for.
Yeah.
But only if I'm, getting more fit, as you might say, whether that be in
Yeah.
my body or with my attention.
Yeah. Practicing what you notice, practicing what you tend to. By the way, I love the way that you talk about like attention as tending to. Such a
Mm,
beautiful way to think about it.
yeah.
Um, hmm. I feel as a visual artist that part of my job in this world is to notice things, is like to be a professional noticer. And there's such an irony that visual artists like myself are so want to be, or were at least initially wanted to be on Instagram, for example, because it's a visual medium. And of course,
Hmm.
show me studio shots all day. Like that is exactly what I want in this world is I want to see the inside of another artist's studio because it's a private space you don't get access to and but it also the effect over time, the cumulative effect of those algorithms on your brain and how it makes you actually like pay attention to things or not pay attention, be distracted from things. It actually feels like it diminishes my powers as an artist, as a noticer. And
Hmm.
I say this as someone who's trying to get back into a studio practice right now. And this is a whole other podcast, a whole other story, but I lost my studio in Hurricane Helene. And so this is more fraught than normal because, I lost everything. But just like really examining that, like what is the artist in me? If I've lost all my art and all my tools, like what what is still here? It's me,
Hmm.
it's my ability, my cultivated ability to notice, and so that feels more precious than ever, and therefore, doing a thing like spending time on a medium like Instagram that just makes me want a dopamine hit rather than that, like, slow, hard working out a visual problem by looking slowly at an object and trying to communicate it visually. It's making me so much more aware of not wanting to do damage like that. The same way that someone who cares about fitness is probably gonna try to stay away from, like, eating candy bars all day long, morning to night, and never taking in any fiber. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if food is your fuel for a specific purpose, you're tending to it in a different way, you're thinking about it differently, and if your visual input is a material resource for your creative output, you want to
mhm,
tend to what that is and how it works. And I think a lot about, with your example of visual artists, I think you're so right. I don't have to tell you this, that like part of your work, a huge part of it is noticing. It's learning to see in a certain way so that you can create from that vision.
mhm,
And I think that with social media, the promise for so long is like you can come here and be seen, right? You're an artist, you know how to
yeah,
see, but come here and now you'll be seen. And frankly, that used to be true. This is the other thing about
mm,
social media.
yeah,
If you joined in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, even 15 maybe, and you had a beautiful visual practice and you learned how to share it and you connected with some other people who had big accounts, like the algorithm would benefit you.
Mhm.
Social media promised so many artists and creative business owners and small business owners free traffic if you fed into the platform for so long. And that worked. I know so many people, I have talked to so many people on my podcast who grew platforms of 40,000, 50,000, 100,000, 400,000 followers from the gifts of the algorithm.
Mhm.
And what every single one of them says to me now is it doesn't work anymore. You do
Yeah.
not get free traffic just for showing up and your stuff looking nice the way you used to.
Yeah.
And so this promise of like, oh, you're an artist, you know how to see, come here and be seen, you don't get seen anymore. And that can lead
Mhm.
to a whole number of like insecurities, questioning the value of your work. That's so hard. And then there's the whole side of the platform you're talking about where the more you scroll, the more you mess up your ability to see to begin with.
Yeah.
And so now you're not only not getting the visibility you were promised, you are also harming your like critical creative skill.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
don't think, I think people feel that, but when I outline it for them that way, it becomes a lot more obvious like, oh, so what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And you may still have good reasons to be there. That doesn't, just because like you see all the problems doesn't mean you have to leave. But I think it's helpful to elucidate. Like there is a lot of harm being done, I think, especially to creative people who are trying to
Mhm.
use social media to share their work.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I wanna tell you this little quick anecdote. Like, for the last 2 years, I have been reading like gangbusters. And the reason is I made this decision. I realized it was a similar to getting off social media, but not quite. It was getting off Netflix. I just realized that I was spending my evenings watching shows. Sure, they're shows people are talking about, but I realized that when I watch a show before bed, I realize I don't sleep as well as when I read before bed. And that also the show has a determined length. And that I'm trying to push my body to stay awake, even when I'm tired and want to fall asleep. But reading has no predetermined length. If the story is so good and it's keeping me up, maybe I do stay up too late, but that's a little rare. Usually my body is the one dictating, and my body's like, time to shut your eyes. And it's like, that's it, right? And it just realized that one, just like from a brain chemistry perspective, those images don't return to me in my sleep. And there's a lot of violence and it actually is disrupting my sleep, and books do not do that. So I realized that my sleep got better when I just made this decision. I'm not going to watch shows before bed. I'm just going to read before bed. Also, I was getting to a point in this low attention world that I think we're in. I want to model for my children that I'm a person who reads. I want to read with them. When they say, "What do you want to do?" Like, do you want to cuddle up and have a cup of tea and read? So, anyway, I realized, like, I have basically replaced my watching time with reading time, and now I read so much that everybody is like, "I can't believe how much you read." And I'm like, "Well, I'll tell you my trick. It's pretty easy. Just don't do Netflix."
I love that. Yeah, I think definitely I could watch less television and reclaim even more of my attention.
I
And
mean, I wish I was where you are with social media. I feel like, chained and having my liver eaten out by the bird. I'm not sure I'm quoting that myth correctly, but
it's not, I know what you're referencing though. Yeah. And I talk to a lot of parents. I'm not a parent myself, but I talk to many parents who this also becomes a big sort of fulcrum point for them, or a sea change, is that their kids start to notice how much they're on social media. And if
yeah.
you want your children to not be on social media all the time, it is helpful to not model that behavior in front
Oh,
of them.
I know.
And I had a great conversation with Ashley Neese about this, and like the sort of moment she realized that, and she was using social media to sort of check out of hard situations. And when she only ever spent time with adults, maybe that was okay. But when she was trying to take care of her kids, she couldn't do that. She needed to stay in it and be in it with them. And
Well,
it was a really great conversation, and I think a powerful mirror of like, what do we go to social media for?
mhm.
Especially because, where we started here, like I agree, especially as small business owners, we are told we have to be on social media.
Mhm.
But I know very few people who can be there like only for their business. Like once
Yes.
you're there, you get sucked in to the
Oh,
short
yeah.
form video, to the cute animals, to the memes. And so even if the reason you're telling yourself is that you're there because your business needs it, it has a much, and even if that's true, even if your business does need it, I have met people who they do a lot of business on Instagram or TikTok, and I respect that. I'm not telling anyone they have to leave. That's not my job.
Yeah.
But even if it's working for your business, you still have to reckon with the impact it has on your attention and on the rest of your life. And
Yeah.
so that becomes something else to mediate and remediate as you keep growing your business and sharing your work.
Gosh, so well put. That's absolutely true. My daughter, who's 15, I have had a very strict 0 social media policy with my 2 girls, and my daughter, who's 15, just asked me, knowing how anti I am, she asked me if she could please now get an Instagram account. I have not given my answer, but I'm really thinking about it, and I've been saying to her, like, all the ways that you connect with your friends now are the ways that people of my generation who've been trained on Instagram are wishing we reflexively did and have forgotten how to do. And that I don't want you to feel that you forget how to do and don't do anymore. And I'm scared that I'm actually going to allow you to forget to connect with your friends in the real way, the like, hey, what are you doing? You want to walk and get ice cream kind of way that you're currently doing. Like,
Yeah. I think it's really does shift relationships, like you've said. I mean, social media is a broadcast channel. And
yeah,
so when we're business owners, there's a certain reason why we might need to broadcast a message or something. But when you're just talking to your friends, you don't need to broadcast to them. And so
yeah,
it becomes, I've also noticed a lot of business owners who like that habit of broadcasting does seep into all their other relationships. And you're used to, your friends just knowing what you're up to because you're on social media. I mean, we haven't said this yet, but I left social media 5 years ago and I haven't been on any of the major apps since. And I have had to rebuild all of those skills. And even
mm,
now, like everyone knows I'm not there. I feel like I'm super publicly not on social media. So my friends tend to remember. They don't like DM me stuff and ask why I haven't seen it. Like I'm never
yeah,
going to see it. So they're pretty aware of this, but it takes time. I talk to a lot of people when they first leave and they're like, I had to I like missed everybody. People forgot to send me stuff. I had to follow up on things. But even
mhm,
now, one of my best friends got engaged last weekend and I had to follow up to get the pictures until I'd be like, what happened? How did it go? I didn't
mm,
know when everybody else knew because I wasn't on social media to see the broadcast announcement of the good news. And so
yeah,
it does reshape your relationships. And frankly, like whether you're on it or not, other people in your life will be. So it's something you're going to have to mediate. But I've
yeah,
just found every relationship in my life is healthier at this stage because I've had to have a conversation about how we want to communicate. Instead of defaulting to Instagram or defaulting to text message or email or whatever, I've just had
mhm,
to talk to everybody. How can we stay in touch? Can I call
mm,
you? Will you never answer the phone? That's okay. Should I text you? Should I send you
yeah,
an email? Like,
yeah,
it's required this sort of refreshing of all of my communication over years with people. And I think that's actually just been a really good skill. And I think it's also why I feel better able to be so relational in email and podcast because those skills, I'm building those skills all the time. I don't
yeah,
expect to be able to broadcast to thousands of people without that effort anymore.
yeah. That's so interesting. Wow. So I don't want to ask you to give away all the secrets of your book. I do think I want people to support you and read your book. But will you give us, in the end of your book, you have steps to get off social media and you also have steps to connect outside social media. And I'm wondering if you could share one or two kind of key takeaways about like somebody who is exploring this, getting their head around it, like me, wrestling daily with it. Like, what are some takeaways for someone like me?
Yeah, of course. Well, The first thing I'll say is that the pieces of the book you reference, the 5-step plan for leaving social media and the 100 ways to share your work and life off social media, those are actually available totally for free in my Leaving Social Media Toolkit. So folks, if you are like Hannah, wondering if you want to leave, if you're considering that, you can just go grab the free toolkit and you can get those pieces. If you want
Mhm.
my philosophical approach to social media, that's what's inside the book. But I think the takeaways I always like to give people are, one, you don't have to leave social media. It is okay to be conflicted and to stay there. When I see my job, I don't see my job as convincing anyone to leave. I like for
Mhm.
people to come to that decision on their own. It's very personal, but it's about your relationship to visibility. It's about your relationship to your business. It's about what your
Mhm.
work needs. It's about what your community is like. And so coming to that decision is a big decision, and I like to treat it with that gravity. And if you decide to leave, I also like to talk about how there's often a grieving process. You have to
Yeah.
grieve different aspects of your identity, your practice, your relationships. So that's the first thing I'll say is, like, if you're struggling with this, that's because it matters to you. And it's not frivolous. It's not silly to worry or stress about if you should leave social media. And it's not trivial to stay there if you know you kind of really want to go. Like, always sit with people in that friction. It's very real. Eventually, with all the artists I know, like, what artists know how to do is transmute a sticky, hard, weird thing into clarity, like a clear thing they can communicate. That is what artists do. And so eventually, the sticky, icky mess of staying on social media when you don't want to be there will transmute into a decision to leave or to not.
Mhm.
Like, it will transmute into a commitment. And so if you decide to leave, that's when the toolkit can be really helpful. I think it's about communicating that you're leaving. It's about setting up other marketing channels where people can land and stay in touch with you. I always
Mhm.
say, don't ghost your followers and don't put yourself on an island. Like, build some bridges. Build a cruise ship that's going to come to the island of your business.
Mhm.
Don't just leave and not tell anybody, and don't just isolate yourself because you decided to go.
Yeah.
Create the channels, communicate it to the people. And remember that people had very successful businesses long before social media existed. And tons of people have very successful businesses now without it. And
Mhm.
so, this idea that you have to have social media to have a successful business is provably false. And at the same time, it just leaving social media doesn't mean you get to quit doing all your marketing.
Yeah.
If you leave social media, you just do other stuff and you get to figure out what that stuff is for you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my, like, all-in-one wrapped in pep talk, encouragement, permission slip to anyone in your position who's like, I'm not liking it here, but I'm still here and I'm not
Yeah.
sure where to go. That's what I have to offer.
I love that. You know what is so funny? As you were saying that, I was like, my own father runs a very successful business. By the way, if anyone wants to hire an architect for a second home in New England, John Cole Architect.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
find him online. You cannot find him on social media.
100%. Yeah. Something friends and I joke about sometimes too is, like, we'll say, like, we only want to work with, like, the healers who, like, don't have a website, whose, like, card is passed, like, tenderly from hand to hand of, like,
Ugh,
this is the chiropractor that fixed me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there,
yes.
that again, like, that word of mouth, that type of referral, you
Mhm.
can, like, that is so precious and will lead to a resilient business over time.
Yeah.
And the internet is not the only way to do that. And social media is not the only way to do that. So, there's so
Yeah.
so much possibility. I find when people feel really stressed about social media, the stakes feel really high and we get really crunched and we feel like it's the only option. But if you can
Mhm.
release that, if you can get more creative and expansive, that's why I made my list of 100 ways to share your work without it. It was me proving to myself that I had so many other options. And
Yeah.
all of us do. We can literally do anything to market our business. We do not just have to post and make videos.
For sure. Actually, I do want to say for anybody listening, like, to definitely do go grab that 100 ways to connect outside of social media because it's actually so life affirming. When I read that list, I was like, oh God, these would all feel so good. Like, I would
Mhm.
love to just write a quick little postcard to 5 friends right now. And it's completely doable. And like, how
Mhm.
meaningful and special when they get that postcard. Actually, I did this a summer ago. or maybe it was right after we talked on your podcast. And a friend recently, like I sent these little cards, they say, "You are beautiful," and then just jotted a note.
Mm.
And a friend just like, months later, she just like sent me a little snapshot of her fridge where this postcard lives forever. And like, she follows me on social media. She's not remind me about posts. Those are gone in a day, right? And I was like, "Aw."
Yeah, that's so sweet and so
Yeah.
connective. I love it.
So connective, so beautiful, and like so much more everlasting. So
Mhm.
meaningful. Yeah. It kind
Yeah,
of
so
like,
tactile.
it feels like the thing, like all of those things, genuinely connecting with people. It feels like the thing that I personally really crave, like deep and true relationships. So I just, I want to say thank you for just reminding me of a thing that I feel like Instagram has been encouraging me to forget.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want that for all of us. I really think I mean, stepping back from social media is a great way to repair relational skills quite often,
Mm,
and that's really important, especially in our,
yeah,
increasingly fractured world. So,
for sure.
again, nobody has to leave social media, but if you want
Yeah.
to, me and Off the Grid and my book are here for you.
Well, that's probably a great place to leave it, Amelia. Can you tell everybody? So we know we can find you off the grid, but tell us what that means. Where can we find you?
Yes, yes. So you can find me personally on my website at ameliahruby.com. You can listen to my podcast anywhere you get your podcast. Just search Off the Grid Leaving Social Media. I also have other podcasts. So if you like tarot or you like books or you like long form chats with friends, I have other shows you can explore. And you can find my book anywhere that you get your books, or you can buy it directly from me at offthegrid.fun/attention.
Ooh, I love it. Thank you so much, Amelia Hruby. It's been so wonderful to have you on. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Hannah. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. It really helps. I'm so grateful. My tax guide, Taxes for Humans, is available wherever you buy books and at sunlighttax.com/book. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.